it's the truth. Don't hold that against me. We do. Our medical malpractice systems are a mess. Doctors practicing defensive medicine because of it, unnecessary tests because of it, costs going up because of it. So the Republicans, seems like once in a while, even they do something good. They propose medical malpractice reform at the federal level within their jobs bill. What do you guys think of that? Pretty good, huh? You guys in favor of that? See? No. This is somebody gets it. Really? You think the federal government has a right to come into California and decide a cap on judgments in our state courts? What attorneys can be paid in our state? What business is it of the federal government to tell the states anything about their own legal systems? Where is that in the United States Constitution? That right of the government, that enumerated power. It doesn't exist. I can't find it. But the Republicans in the Senate, they're creative, they're crafty, they found it. They found constitutional authority. You know where they found it? What clause do you think that they found that authority in? Commerce Clause. Man, that sounds familiar to me. Isn't that what we're fighting right now? Right, Obamacare, based on the Commerce Clause. That's where the constitutional authority comes from. It's ridiculous. It's not usable for Obamacare. It's not usable for medical malpractice reform. But this points out the point I'm trying to make, which is it's not their fault. It's our fault. Because we don't know. Because I didn't know. Because I didn't know the Constitution well enough to say, wait, every time I hear something out of Congress, the House, the Senate, or whether I hear from the President, the first question that I have to ask myself is what they're proposing justified and doable under the Constitution of the United States? If I don't know that document, how can I answer that question? If you know the document, you'll know that the federal government can't regulate states' legal systems. It's just not allowed. And so it's up to us, instead of saying, yeah, wow, man, we really love medical malpractice reform, so good for those Republicans for taking away our constitutional rights. We need to call them and say, what are you guys thinking? You guys like Rand Paul? He's one of the sponsors. I like Rand Paul too, but he's a politician also. That issue, medical malpractice reform, polls 75 to 80% positive rating in the American public. So these guys are going to do what they think you want them to do. That's what they think their job is. So our job is to be educated and to know what the Constitution says we can do. The ends do not justify the means. And we are turning up that hot water in that frog story ourselves by encouraging, if you're a Republican, the Republicans to do this stuff. If you're a Democrat, by encouraging the Democrats to do this stuff. I tell my friends on the left, yes, I do have lots of friends on the left, I tell them, just be careful what you wish for, because someday, once again, the Republicans will be in charge of everything. And they'll take away your constitutional rights, just the same as Democrats are taking away our constitutional rights. You know, left and right are not that far apart on fundamental issues. I think this is important. You were talking to me about preaching to the choir, right? And that a lot of times we're preaching to the choir. I think this is a critical thing. The Tea Party movement, it arose primarily on the right, but remember 40% of our members in the movement nationwide are Democrats and independents, but 60% Republican, people who would generally describe themselves as to the right. So that's where the movement sort of came from initially. But it's important to remember what the movement is based on. Fiscal responsibility, right? Now, how many, you probably all have friends or family on the left, right? Yeah. Okay? And if you said to them, do you believe in the idea of fiscal responsibility? Now, how many of them would say, absolutely not, we think we should be totally irresponsible fiscally? Of course not. They agree with that. If you said to them, look, this country is based on the United States Constitution, and we should follow that Constitution carefully and closely, they would say, yeah, of course. We believe. Now, we might argue about constitutional interpretations. I understand that happens, but they believe in that fundamental. And then in the Tea Party, we talk about free market capitalism. When you say free market, some folks on the left get a little squirmy on it. But if you say, do you believe that capitalism is a system that's lifted the majority of the world's people out of poverty and into wealth and prosperity more than any other system in the world, even most people on the left will say yes to that. So that's common ground. That's not a difference. We're going to differ on policy. We're going to differ on individual politicians. We're going to differ on politics in general, but when it comes to fundamentals, Americans agree. Who disagrees with those things? I mean, really, who would disagree with that? Who actually acts every single day like they don't believe in fiscal responsibility? Congress, the politicians, exactly. Now this is odd. We as Americans all believe in fiscal responsibility. We all believe that you just can't keep spending more than you bring in every day. We all, except for Congress, believe in that. This is a key point. Because I think what we're dealing with here is not a problem within the people. It's a problem, it's a difference between the political parties. But I use that a little bit differently. We have two political parties in this country. Most people would say it's the Democrats and the Republicans. I would say it's the incumbents and the citizens. Those are the two parties we have. Those are the two interest groups. Now, I want to be careful when I say this, because there are politicians in Washington, D.C., in Sacramento, in city government, and city councils that are fighting for the right things. And they're really there for us. And they're really citizen servants, citizen representatives. Those people exist in limited numbers, but they exist. We're lucky to have Tom McClintock's representative, Kim, here today, because he's one of those guys. 20 years plus of fighting for those things. He has the scars to show for it. But the vast majority of them are part of this incredible ruling elite that dominates the country to their own benefit. They have an incumbency machine that protects their seats, right? They gerrymander the districts. They make the primaries hard to participate in. Every district, 80% of districts, by the way, are non-competitive for Congress. That means they won't change hands. 80%. That means 80% of the voting population has really no choice in the general election. How's that for discouraging? Only 20% of the population in this country that votes, which is a minority of the country, actually has a choice in the general election. So our vote, our fight is in the primaries, right? So it's encouraging. We can fight in the primaries. If you've got a Republican primary participating there, you actually might have a choice, right? No, you actually don't have a choice. Sorry to bring the bad news to you. 2010 was a historic year. We saw a sea change in 2010. The largest number of seats changing between parties in 2010 since we've seen since 1938. That's extraordinary. That was the general election. In the primaries, there had to be a big, giant change too, right? So remember, you've got 435 members in the House of Representatives. How many do you think lost in the primaries? Democrat on Democrat, Republican on Republican. Any idea? Anybody know that number? Four. 4 out of 435. Let's see, congressional approval rating was way up then. I think it was about 18%. So how is that possible? Only 18% of us think that Congress is doing a good job, but only 4 out of 435 lost in the primaries. How is that possible? Because the primaries are fake. They're a fixed fight. They don't want us to fight in the primaries. Does it benefit the Republican Party to have 2 Republicans duking it out in the primaries? No. Who controls the primary? The party. Same for the Democrats. They don't want us engaged in that fight. And so what happens is they discourage that fight. All the consultants are discouraged from participating in any fight against an incumbent. So if you're a campaign consultant, you run campaigns for people, you're an advertising consultant, and you've been working with incumbents, you've been working within the machine, and you decide, I really like this challenger. Rocky's great. She's going to be great in the Republican primary. We want to throw out an old incumbent. And you're a consultant, you'll never work again. You're done. That's it. You stepped outside the machine. And the machine is designed to protect the incumbents. And then the incumbents go to Washington, D.C., and they get inside the machine, and what do they want to do?
Stay there.
Stay there. Yeah. They want to protect their jobs. Right? They want to protect their friends' jobs. Some of their friends are on the other side of the aisle. Doesn't really matter. They're all in the same club, and this happens. Right? And the good people some really good people go into Congress and they get co-opted. Some good people go into Congress, they get disgusted by what they see and they leave. Some good people go in there like Tom and they keep fighting, but man, it is a machine. And it is aligned against you and me. It's not left and it's not right. It's not Republican and it's not Democrat. It's the ruling elite. It's the business people, the big corporations too. Now, I love big corporations. I have nothing against multinational, global corporations. Think of all the medicines and inventions and everything they've given us that adds to our quality of life. But I do have a huge problem with the intersection of big corporations and big government. Because who pays the price for that? We do. The regular people do. And my friends on the left, they all agree with that, right? You know, a lot of them are anti-corporate. I'm not anti-corporate, I just don't like that intersection. Where they have a difference with me is I say the same thing is true. Giant unions, giant money intersecting with government, is that a problem? Of course it is. Who suffers when that happens? We do. Exactly the same thing. So what you've got is this stacked up ruling elite stacked against the people. What about big fat universities with multi-billion-dollar endowments like Harvard University? Big academia crossed with big government, who pays the price? We do.